Hello and welcome to this video where we're going to take a look at the features in the new version of Kubla Cubed, Kubla Cubed 2019. We're going to start with just some of the general usability improvements that we've made. So starting with the phases down the bottom here, previously you could move phases left and right using these two buttons, move left, move right. There was a problem when you had like sort of 10 phases and you wanted to move one that you had just created to the beginning of the list. It would take a lot of moving left, moving left, moving left. So now you can drag and drop phases into a different order. So I'll just demonstrate that by creating a new phase, and then we can just drag and drop that to the beginning, so that saves a bit of time. So the next thing is something that was requested by a lot of our users, and that's the ability to edit feature surfaces and site plans within the main design window. In Kubla Cubed 2017 you could edit a site plan or a feature surface in a separate window. So now if you click on edit surface, you'll notice that the editor is the same, but you now have the rest of the project assets still visible, so you can align and even snap boundaries to other site assets. So that's useful in the feature surface for moving, say, the boundary of a feature surface in context to a building pad that you might have created using a platform. In the site plans, it's useful because you can now, when aligning site plans, use the move tool to move one site plan to another. So just to demonstrate that quickly, if you go and edit a site plan, you'll see that the site plan is there, and if you added another site plan you would see that. And when you use the move tool, you could move, say, the corner of this site plan to the corner of another one or another point. Previously you'd have to write down coordinates and it was a bit more fiddly, so that's an improvement there. One thing to note is that if you want to see your site plans or feature surfaces in the old way in a separate window, it might be that you want to just have that clarity of seeing the feature surfaces on its own without the other items in the view. You can still do that by clicking on this button up here, which will pop the site plan into a separate window as it was before. So you've still got the old system, and you've also got the new system that you can access by clicking on this, which will edit it in the same window. So moving on to the next thing is copy and paste. The copy and paste functionality has been improved. We now have copy and paste options in this window here. So the assets that you can copy is elements, so you could select this element and go edit copy and paste that into another phase, or you can use that method to duplicate elements. You can also copy boundary lines, so if I click on this here I can go edit copy, and I could either copy that into another element, or if I wanted to I could copy it into an Excel spreadsheet like so, or you could copy a list of boundary points from a spreadsheet into that list. The same is true for features in the feature surface. So if you go into the feature surface and select, say, a break line, you can copy this list here into another break line. It's probably most useful for boundary outlines. If you want to have an outline of one feature surface to be, say, the same as a strip to adjust to a subgrade, then you can click on this button here and do Control-C to copy the contents and paste it elsewhere. So moving on to the next thing, it's quite a simple improvement, but in the previous version the cursor shows a label showing X, Y, Z existing, Z proposed, and a cut and fill value. You control what's displayed by going measure and ticking these options or unticking them. That used to just show in the design view. Now a small improvement we've made is in the 3D views you can also see that label. So from the point underneath the cursor, a ray is traced onto the surfaces, so it allows a report back of those values on the main surface. So next we have the ability to, these panels down here, we've added an extra one for measure, and you can now expand and collapse them. So if you want a little more space for the earthworks, you can double click on these ones to collapse them. So that's another thing that is worth knowing about. Okay, so next we'll move on to improvements we've made to editing elements. So another thing that we get frequently requested from users is the ability to snap earthworks elements to each other. So that has now been integrated in the program. So if you go into the edit menu and go snap points, you can now turn on the ability to snap boundaries of earthworks elements to each other, and also you can snap to an arbitrary grid which you can define. So if you click on snap to grid, you'll find these options for grid interval, and also you can set the grid interval origin by either typing it in or by pressing Ctrl O on the keyboard. So just to quickly demonstrate that if you create a platform here and you create another platform, you now have the ability, if you go close to one of the boundary points, you can snap those together. So it allows you to create these sort of seamless designs, whereas before it was quite difficult to do so. So moving on to the next item, which sort of feeds into point snapping as well, is the ability to turn the side batter off. So previously, if you wanted earthworks elements to have a vertical side, then you would need to set the cut and fill batter angle to 1 in 0.01, and that would be an approximation for vertical. However, now you can turn them off completely. So if we go into the 3D view and have a look at this platform, if we turn off side batter, you'll notice that it just switches to a vertical sides. That's much more simple in the reports, etc., when you're seeing a side batter of off rather than a side batter of 0.01, which can be confusing for people who aren't that familiar with the program and how it works. So the final improvement to the editing of elements, it relates to feature surfaces exclusively, and that is to do with the way floating points are managed. So previously in the program, if you created a break line and you left one of the values blank, when you finished the break line, that point would be interpolated from the other ones that you had entered. And that was a good system because it meant that you didn't have to enter the elevations of every point along a break line. However, the disadvantages of that is if you wanted to then go and edit that break line, you would find that you then had to edit every single point because they'd already been interpolated. So instead, we've made a slight improvement to that, is that you can now permanently leave a value blank in a break line or in an outline which you've set to enter the values explicitly, which is a similar sort of thing. So break lines are quite useful for retaining walls and hard edges, etc., or the side of roads. So I'll just quickly demonstrate how, if you create one now where you click and you enter the values, so add 100 there, and then I'm going to leave these ones blank and then add 200 there, click complete, finish, and then you'll notice that these inner values say not set, and it won't give an error when you click OK, that the program will calculate those at calculation time. Now if you want to now edit these, you can move them around and the Z value stays not set, so it gives you quite a lot of power to have the points where you've set a value, and then you can still change the ones where the value's not set, and the interpolation is done at calculation time, so you don't have that same problem as before. It's quite an important improvement, that, and people who've been using break lines will sort of know the value of that. So next we'll move on to a big improvement to Kubla Cubed 2019, and that's improvements to the measurements that we were producing in the reports. So previously there's a lot of measurements that are produced in the reports related to the earthworks, such as the 2D and 3D area of disturbance, and also we report on the boundary perimeters, which you can obtain in the create spreadsheet input data and earthworks, or create report and the same. But now what we've done is added an additional measurement module, which allows you to add additional measurements into the report. So a lot of people asked us, since we've aligned our site plans and scaled them, and we've done our earthworks, how do we do lengths, areas and counts? And so we thought we'll just add that into the program for the convenience, and here it is. So you can add a count, length or area the same way as you would add an earthworks element, but these don't have any effect on earthworks, they're just simple measurements. So that's quite handy for measuring fences, doing counts of items, assets on your site without having to do that whole takeoff in a separate program. So another thing that is in the measurements panel is this volume region option, and that's really useful for isolating cut and fill in a certain region. So if I draw a volume region here, in the report I will get a breakdown of not only the whole cut and fill of the phase like we used to before, and also cut and fill of different element clusters, which we used to before, but also we'll get a breakdown by volume region. So that can be really useful when you've done a bulk cut and fill project and you get a question from a stakeholder who says, I want to know the cut and fill in just the car park or just the school. And previously you might have had to redesign the project to calculate that value, like maybe delete some of the stuff and get a cut and fill of just a school, whereas now you can use this volume region tool, which is incredibly powerful because it allows you to isolate cut and fill in a specific region. So moving on to the final thing, that is improvements we've made to the CAD capabilities of the program. What we've done is we've added support for the DWG format. So now when you either import a CAD file or export, you can now select DWG, which is quite important because previously we just supported DXF, which is a interchange format of data. However, that meant in most scenarios people had a DWG file and they're having to convert it into a DXF file and then bring it into Kubla Cubed. Just created an extra step which we've removed by supporting DWG natively. So now you'll notice in the options, the CAD related options you'll have, it will default to DWG. You can still use DXF if that was the option that you preferred, but you have all these DWG formats as well, which is much more consistent with professional CAD tools. Another thing that we've done which is makes things a bit easier is in a feature surface when you import CAD data, there is now the ability to copy and paste data directly from CAD. So if you have a CAD file open and you have contour lines, for instance, you can select contour lines in a CAD file and then paste them directly into this. So that can make the import process a lot simpler. So that's an alternative way of importing, say, contour lines, break lines, outlines and points, is rather than using this button here, which is import from CAD and then selecting layers, you can also copy and paste directly to CAD. So that's all the main new features in Kubla Cubed 2019. There's a host of other improvements and fixes that we've applied to the program, so it's now available to download for subscribers and users of Kubla Cubed Lite. If you have a perpetual license, please get in touch and we can give you a quote for upgrade costs to this version. I'd recommend anyone interested in the new features to give it a try, and if you've got any questions, as normal, post in the comments of this video or on our forums. Thanks for watching.